A lot of us think of ourselves as I'm a visual person, or an auditory person, or a kinesthetic person. And that's okay, but it can lead us astray. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to not go astray with this. My name's Steve and I coach professional people just like you to make a peaceful mind your superpower. And a good place to start is with my free, simple 5-step guide to mastering stress in the moment. On any journey of transformational personal change, we're likely to encounter the idea that we process information using our visual, auditory and kinesthetic faculties, and also to a lesser extent our olfactory and gustatory faculties. In simpler terms, that's see, hear, feel, smell and taste. Now there are two ways that we're likely to encounter that idea. One is in the sense of understanding our strengths and preferences about how we use those thinking faculties, and the other is about how we might redesign our use of those faculties for certain tasks. And it's in the noticing of our strengths and preferences that we might come to think of ourselves as I'm a visual person, or I'm an auditory person, or I'm a kinesthetic person. There's nothing wrong with that because it shows self-awareness about how we like to process information. It is a broad generalization, however, and there are traps for the unwary. Before I get into why, let me ask a question. Are you an arms person, a legs person, or a back person? When we say we're a visual person, we perceive ourselves to be stronger at working with visual information, such as pictures and diagrams and spatial layouts. When we say we're an auditory person, we perceive ourselves to be stronger at working with auditory information, such as sounds, and in a special case of what we call auditory digital, words. Now here's a way that being self-aware of our preferences can be a good thing. If you're struggling to understand something, you might be able to say to somebody, I might understand this better if you draw it out for me. Or you might recognize if you're reading a textbook, maybe I should draw this out for myself. Here's where it's not so good. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm a visual person. Or even worse, we should take the kids and we should separate the visual kids from the auditory kids. We should teach the visual kids visually. We should teach the auditory kids auditorily. See, here's where I go back to my earlier question. Are you an arms person, a legs person, or a back person? See, whatever you may think about that, the only way you can lift a heavy box is to use all three in combination. Even if our arms are stronger than our legs, it doesn't mean to say that we use them for everything and in isolation. Let me explain one of my learning strategies to you. That's right, I said one, implying that there are more. One way I've found to make sense of complicated systems is to start with a two-dimensional diagram, and I talk myself through that diagram to help myself create an internal three-dimensional moving model, which I test if it feels right. So am I visual, auditory or kinesthetic? Because if you listen closely, I use all three of those faculties in that strategy. I start with the visual input. I use my auditory faculty, specifically my auditory digital faculty, to translate that to create an internal visualization, which I test by feeling. That we use all of our faculties in combination to process information is closer to the truth. So whilst I might have a noticeable preference for visual thinking or for auditory thinking, I might identify myself as such as a visual or auditory person. We're not really a visual or an auditory person in the same way that we're not really an arms or a legs person. Now let me go back to a point I made earlier about how I have more than one learning strategy. Gregory Bateson talked about logical levels of learning, and without going into the depths of it here, what it essentially points at is that what's better than having one fixed way of doing things is to have a requisite variety of ways of doing things. Our intelligence doesn't come from isolating just our visual, auditory or kinesthetic faculties. It comes from having a requisite variety of ways of using them in combination. So yes, be self-aware of your strengths and preferences about how to process information. However, if we want to continuously learn and grow and become ever more capable, stretch all the faculties and keep challenging ourselves to working in new ways of using them in combination. That's why we should learn to dance and to sing and to write poetry and to do mathematics and to do logic and to paint. Besides, sometimes we have to adapt to the task because the task won't adapt to us. Now, for professional people, a key part of the personal development journey is learning to be able to stop thinking about work. Now, to master that, watch this video here. This is Steve, wishing you health and happiness.